Join us as we dive into the history, hauntings, and high strangeness of the world to try to better understand the paranormal. I will be your guide. I am paranormal researcher and investigator Eric Freeman-Sims. Welcome to the Unseen Paranormal Podcast. Hey everybody, Eric here. Just wanted to say thank you for listening to the show, all the love that y'all have brought the past 2 seasons. I'm so excited to bring you the season 3 premiere, but just wanted to make a few announcements about what we have coming up in the month of October for the Unseen Paranormal Podcast. One of the things I'm so excited to announce, we've announced it on social media, but I have teamed up with Southern Gothic, the podcast, to bring our shows live on stage. We will be live on stage at the Palace Theater in Gallatin, Tennessee on October 14th. Tickets are on sale now at southerngothicmedia.com or unseenparanormalpodcast.com, or you can find those ticket links on all the social medias for both of our shows. Like I said, that's October 14th from 7 to 9 p.m. It's going to be a lot of fun. Come on out, check out the show if you're in the Middle Tennessee area or want to travel down and see us in Gallatin, Tennessee. Also, on October 1st, I will be teaming up with friend of the show and my buddy Alan Searcy, the author of the Southern Ghost Story series of books. We will be in Gallatin at the Fall Festival, downtown Gallatin with a tent. So come by and say hi if you're in the area and get your autograph book from Alan. If you want to talk paranormal, we can talk paranormal as well. And then also October 29th, we'll be at the Pumpkin Festival in Franklin, Tennessee, downtown Franklin. It's always awesome to do festivals down there. It's always busy, thousands of people. Lots of fun. Franklin's a beautiful city as well, but we'll be down there. I'll be down there with Alan as well. Like I said, come by and visit us there, talk some paranormal, get your book signed, grab some paranormal merchandise, and hope to see you at one of the events coming up soon. But here is our first guest for season 3, Ronald L. Murphy Jr. He is a great guy. I got to meet him at the Cryptid conference at Land Between the Lakes earlier this year. Hope you enjoy. We'll see you around. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to the show. This week, we have a great guest for you. We are chatting with author, folklorist, researcher, and investigator, Ronald L. Murphy Jr. For over 30 years, Ron has been researching and investigating the stuff of nightmares. He has researched the historical and psychological context of myths and legends from around the world. Ron is the author of On Vampires, On Wild Men, Tracking Bigfoot Through History, On Dogman, Tracking the Werewolf Through History, and many other nonfiction and fiction books. His books are available on Amazon, Kindle, and wherever fine books are sold. You can connect with Ron on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Hey, Ron, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, it's my pleasure, my friend. I'm actually very flattered to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming on. I got to meet you at the Dogman Cryptid conference about a month ago in Paris, Tennessee, and loved your lecture that you gave up there. I thought it was great.
Well, I appreciate it. I will tell you what, that was a great conference. I think that you'll probably agree to that as well.
Yes.
It was bringing a lot of people from a lot of diverse backgrounds as well together to have a very civilized, intellectual look at this phenomenon that's going around, and I was very honored to be part of that. And it was great meeting you and a myriad of other people there as well too. Everybody that I met there was very, very fine folk, and I was very proud to be part of it.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. Great guests there. You know, you were there, like I said, and then I've had King Gerhardt on the show, and I've had Lyle Blackburn, so it was nice to finally meet them in person as well. And then, like I said, I was just blown away by your presentation because I love the history, and I talk a lot on the show here about the history behind hauntings and things and how important that is. And I think with cryptids, dogmen, and all that stuff, I think it's important to understand the mythology, legends, and the history behind that stuff as well.
I agree totally. So, coming from a background in academia, and one of the things that I focused on in graduate school was history. I mean, that was a very important part of my life, and it's really a passion of mine. And the way I look at the paranormal is if people are reporting things like Bigfoot and Dogman, there has to be a historical precedent to it. History doesn't exist in a vacuum, and if these things are a phenomenon now, then they obviously had to be around in preceding generations. And looking at First Nations and Native American Indian accounts, the whole way back, as far as I could go back into historical records, and even getting glimpses in prehistory as well for the archaeological record, we can see that these things that frighten us now, these Bigfoot and Dogmen and vampires and a number of other creatures, have been around with us since the very beginning. So as a researcher, that's great if these happen to be flesh and blood animals. That's fabulous, as a cryptozoological standpoint. But from a historical psychological standpoint, it's also fascinating to think that they mean something to us even today, the 21st century, with technology and electricity and everything. They still mean something to us this day. They're still the nightmare. These are still reasons why we leave night lights on. These are the things that go bump in the night, and I'm fascinated from so many different perspectives. And like I said, it's become something that's really look, as part of that conference, I was in awe of these people down here. I mean, these are the people that I followed, Lyle Blackburn, Ken Gerhardt. These are the guys that I really looked up to and I admired. And now to be part of that group and being able to present my case in that type of form, that really meant a lot to me. But there's a lot of good researchers out there. You have to look at it from a whole perspective. There's a lot of people out there that just simply want to be in it because it's fashionable or they think they're going to get some sort of notoriety. But for the people that are really trying to find the answers to these kind of questions, these are the ones that, a lot of people don't talk to because it's not quite as fabulous as going out there, at night,
right.
Loaded to the teeth and stuff like that. So I do most of my research. I make no qualms about it. I do most of my research in libraries. I do most of my field work around my general area because I think that field work is necessary as well, too. But I deal more in the psychology of it than the nuts and bolts of it.
Yeah. So how did you get started in doing research and investigating and writing the books?
Oh, it's my mother. I everything that I owe of who I am as a person today is to my mom. Unfortunately, she passed away at 55 whenever I was only 32 years old. So she had a lot more to teach me, but unfortunately it didn't work out that way. But as a kid, we would listen to the radio because this was before podcasts. This was in the late 70s. And we would listen to local researchers about Bigfoot sightings, about UFO sightings. And then the next day, she would take my brother and I out, and we would investigate the areas where these sightings had supposedly occurred.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it was awesome to be. I'll tell you what, being a kid, it was kind of like a Norman Rockwell meets Stranger Things type of upbringing.
Right.
It was great because you could still buy penny candy at the time, but we would buy that penny candy and then we would put it in the car and then we would go out looking for Bigfoot on back roads. That was a great way to be alive. And also the research back then really kind of shaped me who I am today is because we had to go to the library. We didn't have the internet or anything. So we had to go to the card catalogs and we had to research all these things. And at that point, there was only about 4 or 5 books out on the subject. This was very new. This was very on the periphery of anything. This was a genre subject and very few people talked about this. But it was great to find some of these old books, and just to really dive into it as a teenage boy, really wanted to get answers about what was going on. And like I said, reading an actual book and then forming my own little clubs based upon the research that I got from those books. And then me and some of the local kids would go out and look for things. This was a great way to be alive. And like I said, it stayed with me even now. I'm 50 years old now, and it's still with me to this day, that kind of giddiness and that kind of wide-eyed, childish awe of the world.
Yeah, and that's awesome to have a parent who was nurturing of that and wanted you to go out and seek things out in the world, because I think there are so many parents that kind of dumb it down and, tell their kids that their imaginary friend's not real when maybe it's really a ghost or something, or they didn't see something, and so many people kind of keep their mouths shut about the stuff. And I think that's good. The good thing about TV shows nowadays and podcasts being prevalent is that a lot more people are coming forward as well with their stories. And like you said, the Dogman and Bigfoot and things like that have been around since we have. It's just come to the forefront with pop culture nowadays.
Yep. You've hit the nail on the head. That's absolutely right. And, with the internet now, I could have a sighting, put it on the internet, and 100,000 people can read about it and disseminate it. But back in the day, we didn't have that kind of a thing. We would have an occasional radio show here and there, but really, it was the written word that was getting things out there, and really not a lot of stuff was known about that day. So now what's going on in the world today is you have a lot of self-appointed experts in the field because they've gathered the information. Now they pretend that they know what's going on with whether it comes to hauntings or cryptids or anything. part of the paranormal world, you have the experts out there now, which I really tend to shy away from because we still have no idea. This is a gray area. After I write my books, I am never left with a definitive conclusion. There's always a question mark at the end because it is going down that proverbial rabbit hole, right? Every time you go deeper, there's going to be another way to go. And I really like this. I mean, I'm writing a book right now, based upon Earth lights because we were out on an expedition not too long ago, and we encountered what would be called Earth lights, some sort of unexplained light anomaly that was, moving the trees during a Bigfoot investigation. We didn't encounter Bigfoot, but we did encounter these lights. And now I'm starting to do research and finding out that, the idea of these Earth lights associated with all kinds of paranormal activities, whether it's hauntings or cryptid encounters or UFOs, is part of that kind of historical timeline as well, too. So that's what I'm working right now because I had some sort of encounter that I could not explain. So now, I hit the research to find out what other people have experienced. And I find it absolutely amazing what people are going through. But the first book that I wrote was about my research here in Western Pennsylvania called The Unexplained World of the Chestnut Ridge. And it was just, it was a one-off book. I was going to compile all the information that I had gathered over probably about 30 years at that time, that I was doing some research, put it together in a book, talked about thunderbirds and black cat sightings and Bigfoot and Dogman and all the other things that are happening in Western Pennsylvania. And I finished the book. I got to do a show on Coast to Coast, So really, I was at my pinnacle, my friend. And writing a book is a hard work too. So I thought, you know what, I'm done. Except I have a daughter, Willow, who was at that time was probably 6 years old whenever I completed the book, and she was really into mermaids. And she said, "Dad, you write about Bigfoot and all that stuff. Do you think there's such a thing as a mermaid?" I thought, you know what, I never thought about this. So I said, let me do some research, see what I can come up with. And I began to do some research, just offhandedly, a few minutes here and then. I found a great history about mermaids. So the first book that I wrote after I wrote the Unexplained World of the Chestnut Ridge was on mermaids, just because of my daughter's suggestion. And then I came up with this great idea of the archetypes, which, Carl Jung, I was a huge fan of his psychological approach to the way we view the world around us. And he has this notion of archetypes, and I am now exploring archetypes, these cryptids as archetypes, and what they mean to the human imagination and the human development. So now I'm looking through the lens of archetypes and why, I say this is one of my go-to things I've come up with, that these archetypes are embroidered into our DNA. As human beings, we have an innate knowledge of these things that we call, vampires, werewolves, all those other things above. And so these archetypes are seen throughout the world. Even ghosts are archetypes in their own way as well, too.
Yeah.
And if so we could just basically trace them throughout human development, throughout all cultures, So from the very beginning of time, whenever we were huddled around a campfire, that was very, very frightening to us. But as I said, earlier, we are still frightened of these things, even in 2022. We're still we're very frightened about these things.
Yeah, and the fact that, there's so much more information out there, like you were saying, on Bigfoot and Dogman and all these different cryptids. I think people are to where they thought, okay, well, that's just folklore or bedtime story. Now people are saying, well, maybe there really is something to that. Maybe we should be afraid of them again.
Absolutely, absolutely. Or maybe not so much a fear, but a respect. And that's right. The other thing that I like to work with as well, too. So if nothing else, when we talk about these things that live in the woods and, and haunt the shadows, we're talking about things that live outside of our control, right? So these things are creatures that live outside of our capabilities to understand what they are. We need them as much as they need us. It's kind of a symbiotic relationship, right? So this idea of these creatures being out there, being able to hide under our nose, in our very shadows, outside in our backyards. That's also very fascinating because it puts us in our place. It shows us that we are not the end all and be all, that there's other things out there that we simply cannot wrap our minds around. And because mainstream science has not pinned them down to an examining table, they're not categorized. So they're still officially not existing.
Right.
That everyday people are witnessing these things. Also, I think that it gives the common person a hand in the scientific research too. The Dogman Conference, for instance, I thought that it could have easily been held in an academic setting. And why these kind of things aren't put on within a college atmosphere is beyond me, because these things need to be talked about from a multidisciplinary perspective in order to get to the bottom of this stuff. But because we're still a fringe and still a pseudoscience, we are, relegated down to conference halls and everything like that, which is fine with me. I have no problem with that. But it's the common person that's out there doing research and that's finally connecting these dots. And then I kind of, puts the scientists in their place, because these people with open minds, even though they don't have any degrees, these people with open minds are going out there and really delving in to areas of our life or psychology of our world that other people are neglecting and overlooking. And I think that should be, there should be applause to those people that are doing these things. And also the other thing too, whenever we think of cryptozoology, it doesn't have to be about monsters. It doesn't have to be about the Loch Ness Monster or Bigfoot or the abominable snowman. It could be about anything. It could be about the ivory-billed woodpecker that is supposed to be extinct down in Arkansas. People are still looking for these things. And I really, truly believe that things like the thylacine, things like, certain types of birds, maybe not quite as glamorous as the thunderbird, but, the golden eagle that Audubon had wrote about that nobody else has ever been able to discover. These kind of creatures will be uncovered by those people that call themselves cryptozoologists instead of mainstream science, because the cryptozoologists believe in the possibility of them being out there. Right. And science is not going to find them because they simply don't believe it.
Yeah, and I find it fascinating that somebody can be convicted of murder on an eyewitness testimony and possibly be put to death or in jail for the rest of their life. But mainstream science doesn't want to take all these eyewitnesses that have seen Bigfoot and Dogman and all these cryptids seriously. When you have hundreds or even thousands of people that have experienced these things and they're not misidentifying, then why wouldn't they take them seriously?
Exactly. And evidence as well, too. The right. Footprints alone, there's hair samples out there that are coming back unexplained. We have vocal recordings like Ron Moorhead's Sierra sounds. We have evidence, my friend, and that's a great point that you brought up. We have evidence. We have a wealth of eyewitness testimony. And as you said, if this was in a court of law, you would have to find this person guilty of the crimes at hand, because everything kind of adds up. But we're not taking that into account. It's almost like a faith, right? I think a lot of people, especially a lot of scientists, see it almost as kind of a pseudo-religion as well, too, quasi-religious aspects, that we have to believe in something. And in order for you to believe in something, there has to be this faith in something that is not readily at hand, not readily there. But people are witnessing these things, and people are having firsthand accounts and encounters with these things. So at that point, it's a little bit beyond faith, because these people are experiencing them directly. But people are throwing it out the window. By people, I mean, scientists are throwing it out the window. But if we could all gather together and think, look, for, at least into the 1880s in the Americas, if we're just going on the white person's eyewitness testimony, let's throw out the indigenous culture, because a lot of people do that kind of stuff because they think it's some sort of quaint, archaic mythology. All right, so we're only going to base this upon the European accounts, okay? They go back, into the mid 1800s, okay? Although there are, kind of rumors out there, speculating rumors as early as, the late 1600s, early 1700s as well, too. But we'll go into the 1800s. So what we're trying to say is, this, nearly 200 years of nonstop encounters and accounts of these creatures are going to be completely dismissed. That is quite a conspiracy. I couldn't even wrap my mind around how people could come up with this, because what we're saying is that everybody has to be drinking the Kool-Aid and buying into this, and it doesn't make any sense. Now, of all the people that I've ever interviewed, occasionally you will get people that are kind of swept up in the limelight of such things. Sure, that happens. They're not necessarily trying to pull one over on you, but they're probably misidentification of something that's out there. But of all the people that I've ever interviewed, I would say that 90%, and that's a huge number, 90% of the people that I've actually interviewed about Bigfoot or encounters with the unknown of any kind are very lucid, and it's a very real experience. Some of them, some of the men that I've interviewed even have broke down in tears because the sighting, the encounter had affected them so systemically. It changed the way they looked at the world around them. And that says something, that says something to me that these people are not making this stuff up. And in actuality, the majority of the people that have had these kind of encounters wish they wouldn't have had this encounter, right? Except whenever it comes to ghosts. Now, I'm glad that you did bring up ghosts because that's kind of like, that's kind of overlooked. People tend to take cryptozoology and set it to one side, UFO encounters set it to another side, and of course you have the ghosts that are often a wing all by itself. But in my view, the world of the paranormal is such a gray area that all these things kind of blend together. And I think that we need to have a very intelligent talk about all these things separately and has also how they interact with one another as well.
Yeah. I've been doing a little bit of research myself because I live in Tennessee. I live in Middle Tennessee outside of Nashville, and I'm a ghost guy. And so, I don't go down, I go down rabbit holes sometimes with cryptids and stuff, but I hadn't kind of gone down the rabbit hole of like dogmen. And I wasn't aware of all of the dogman sightings and activity in Lamantine Lakes. And there's like just in that one area, there are reports going back to like the French traders who settled kind of Middle Tennessee, and the Native Americans warned them about things like dogman and things like that, and they just blew it off. But then they had weird things happen to them. And so, this goes way back further in history, and we tend to think about, Native Americans, they didn't have technology, so they were stupid, or, that's just kind of the general thing with people nowadays. They didn't have computers, but they were very smart and very attuned to the land. And so the fact that they have these legends and folklore and these stories about things like dogman and Bigfoot, and it was just kind of something that was real to them, really fascinates me. And that we find, petroglyphs and things that they even drew these things, and it was very much real in their world.
Right. And that's a great point as well, too. From California, the whole way over to New England, then we go up into the Badlands, the whole way down to Texas. The entire breadth and width of the United States has indigenous stories concerning Bigfoot. Now, there are different names and different, Aboriginal vernaculars, but we're talking about the same being, whether it's Bigfoot or whatever. And then to throw that all out, to me, is ludicrous. Because we are dealing with a culture that was intimately based on the world around them for survival. If it didn't rain, they would die. If the winter was too bad, they would die. To intimately know the land around you like that is really not one in which you're going to be making up boogeyman stories. It really doesn't play any point in that. The idea of personifying nature is one thing, but to create a character out of nothing, just simply to pass the time, doesn't make much sense to me. So I truly believe, and this is really my thesis for all the books that I write, I truly believe that somewhere in our ancient past, now this is discounting anything going on nowadays, I'm just talking about the genesis for these types of archetypes. Somewhere in our primal beginnings, we were confronted with creatures like the Bigfoot or like the dogman, and now we are dealing with it in our collective human psyche, even to this very day. Okay, that is something that's kind of awe-inspiring if you think about that we are dealing with a hereditary knowledge that these things were out there. And I remember whenever I was in college, I was actually a freshman in college, and I was taking a anthropology 101. This was my first foray into the world of anthropology. And in one of the books that I bought, it was, Anthropology 101 primer. It's one of those things where a couple of professors wrote it and it was like $75, nothing like off of Amazon now, but it was a real college book, and there was a part in there that still strikes me today. It was a claim that the legend of the abominable snowman may go back to a historical remembrance of an occasion whenever our human species ran into the Gigantopithecus. And that gave rise to the legend of the abominable snowman. And I was thinking, well, if that could give rise to the legend of the abominable snowman, then what do we do about werewolves? What do we do about the dogman? What do we do about vampires? So if there is that possibility, and this is a possibility in mainstream academic work, okay, this was broached by two professors. If it's possible that happened in our past, what else may we have encountered back then as well, you know? And I think that the more the archaeological record is showing that we are, as our human species has been around for about 200,000 years, we were in direct contact with things like giants and things like, you know, the small Homo florensis, you know, in Indonesia, the little hobbit. So I think if we would go back in time to, you know, 200,000 years, I think it would probably be almost like something out of Tolkien's the Lord of the Rings. We were probably dealing with a lot of different hominid forms out there that have since, you know, went the way of the dodo. You know, they were evolutionary dead ends. We, as modern humans, were able to rise above everything, and our intellect saved us. But I truly believe that we encountered a lot of different things that is only culturally remembered as part of our human race.
Yeah, it's fascinating that we don't have more of a record, and they're just finding bits and pieces, like maybe a jaw, and trying to put the family tree together of hominids. And
right.
and I find that to give credibility, like you're saying, into Bigfoot and some other upright that maybe are just small populations that, you know, we have missed. And people think that, you know, everything's been explored, but there are vast amounts of forest. Like Land Between the Lakes is a huge area, but then out on like the West Coast, you have like 68,000 square miles on the Pacific coast of nothing but forest and things like that, where something like, you know, these things could live if they are flesh and blood. And then you have the other camp of people that think they're, you know, maybe interdimensional or something like that.
Right. But even if they're interdimensional, that still does not rule out the idea that they could not be found in the archaeological record.
Right.
I had done a lot of research into Mesopotamia, you know, these kind of cultures of the Fertile Crescent that was trying to deal with the world around them. And you can find in that culture these kind of swirling patterns, the same kind of patterns that can be found on the Newgrange burial tumulus in Ireland, or the same type of patterns that you can find in sub-equatorial Africa or in China. You can find these same swirling patterns throughout the world from the same time period. And some of these instances, especially whenever you look at places like Babylon or places even like the Southwest of the United States, where these swirling patterns seem to show a humanoid figure rising out of it. Now, could this possibly be the knowledge that portals did exist? Of course, this is putting a little bit of woo into this, but what are we supposed to do when we are presented with these kind of images? You know, like I always say that people have the exact same mind. You know, you would have had Shakespeare's 200,000 years ago. You would have had Stephen King's 2,000 years ago. We have the same mind, the same imagination.
Right.
But these things are so clear that it's very possible that we were witnessing what you call some sort of portal transference or something like that, in glimpses of these, you know, of these archaic petroglyphs.
Yeah, and people are fascinated right now with like Skinwalker Ranch, and you have lots of petroglyphs out there as well from the in the Uintah Basin. And I think that's one of the things that with Skinwalker Ranch, that's kind of brought the Dogman to pop culture to where it wasn't as prevalent before. And that's, you know, goes back to what I was saying about the TV shows. But yeah, these things have been around for hundreds of years, as long as we've been around, like you've been saying. And to think that even if they are interdimensional, like you were saying, they could be flesh and blood and still be somewhere in the record.
Well, sure, that's right. And Skinwalker Ranch is the perfect place to point out, too, about the ambiguity of what we're dealing with, because the Skinwalker Ranch has had cases of unexplained earthlights, you know, unidentified flying objects. wolf-like creatures that seem to prowl around the place that aren't affected by bullets of any kind. This is the perfect storm for, observing things that are paranormal and that don't fit inside their boxes neatly. There's an overflow of what's going on. And if that is the case, in England especially, we have the idea of ley lines and these points on the earth where there is more energies, let us say, than other places. Is it possible that the earth itself is producing these things? Maybe it's nothing extraterrestrial. Maybe it's something not even interdimensional. Maybe it's something from the earth itself that is allowing these things to kind of bleed through. These are the questions that we need to ask. And as we stated at the very beginning, so many researchers, because it doesn't fit into their particular schema, they'll throw it out because it doesn't make any sense to them.
Yeah.
And we might be losing amazing research because so many people throw this out and just take it, as something that was made up, whatever. We might be missing out on the true nature of what's going on.
Yeah, and I think you have, like, on the ghost side of things, to what your point of what you're saying, on the ghost side of things, you have, I mean, we believe in things, tulpas and thought forms that, and even like poltergeist comes from our own energy being put into the atmosphere. And, the theory is on poltergeist that they can become their own consciousness.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. See, this is good to talk to you because, you are obviously a very intelligent person. And also you have a knowledge of how this stuff works, being a researcher yourself. Sometimes whenever I come onto these shows, it's difficult to try to explain to the host who has never had any dealings with the paranormal or the supernatural. So this is really refreshing. And like I said, I'm very happy to be here. But absolutely that is the thing. So when we go to places like Gettysburg, we're obviously looking for the ghost of departed souls. But I have received 2 pictures from researchers, one from Canada, one from Vancouver, as a matter of fact, and the other one from Western Pennsylvania, that they were taking pictures in a reported haunted location. And both of the pictures have an image on there that looks strikingly like a gray alien. Now, again, what are we supposed to do with this? This is rather strange. This is rather bizarre. But again, we're not going to throw out this because it doesn't make any sense. And because it doesn't look like a figure draped in a white sheet, we're not going to throw it away. We're going to think that it means something. And is it to say that extraterrestrials are, the ghosts in some areas? It's very possible. Or is this, something interdimensional? And there's also a really striking theory that it could be, us. It could be human time travelers from another period of time. All this stuff kind of doesn't make sense, kind of does make sense. But again, there's no experts in this, so we really don't know what we're talking about.
Right. Yeah, and another theory that I've kind of dove into, especially with Bigfoot, because there are reports of Bigfoot, creatures just disappearing and time slips. And maybe that's a creature that lived a long time ago, but somehow there's a time slip and they're coming into our time briefly, and that's why they're disappearing. And, or maybe all of the above. Like you said, there's no experts, so it's all these theories. It could be all of the theories.
It could be all of them. That's exactly right. Now, I like the idea of time slips. And I think that, as a ghost researcher, you do have to kind of come into play with the idea of time slips because ghosts are bookmarks to time, right? And I think that whenever people talk about residual hauntings, that in and of itself could be a way that we're looking back on something, something slipped. A gear slipped out of, the space-time continuum to put us back to some other place that's playing out in front of us,
Right.
But I have researched an area called Hillview Manor, which is an iconic place here in Western Pennsylvania, in Newcastle, Pennsylvania. And I was on a ghost hunt with some folks from Michigan, and they had all the bells and whistles and all the gadgets and everything. But whenever I arrived, I was notified that the spirit box was already calling out my name, which is kind of freaky before you even begin an investigation.
Right.
But I had my daughter with me. I had my daughter Willow with me. And we went in there, and the spirit box was saying her name. It was saying my name. It was saying my mother's name. What was interesting is the people that actually paid to be a part of this ghost investigation also had their own spirit boxes or downloaded some sort of device onto their phone, and it was picking up the same thing. So there was corroborating evidence. But whenever I was, in the process of the evening went through, something came through the spirit box that sounded remarkably like my young son calling out, "Daddy, Daddy, Daddy." It caught me so much by surprise whenever I heard it that it brought tears in my eyes. So is it possible that when we go into these ghostly locations, there is some sort of time slip that's dealing with us all, where the past is present and, it seemed as if we were in some sort of loop. And it wasn't only a loop for a departed soul, it was a loop for everybody that was there at that particular incident.
Yeah.
That's crazy, But again, and I've talked about this in one of my books that I've written, time is an illusion, right? It's an agreed upon format in order to set the working day apart from the sleeping day. Time really does not exist. We count it because our Earth goes around a star, that's how we count it. But time, like we think in linear time, truly doesn't exist. So is it possible that, and again, you brought up a brilliant point of view, is it possible that what we're dealing with is the past is in our present at times, or possibly sometimes whenever we deal with UFOs, the future is in our present?
Yeah. Yeah, and with all the alien disclosure, I've kind of posed that question of maybe this is just us from the future and technology we have coming back and maybe not meant to be seen. Nick Groff is doing some interesting experiments on his, he has a new show called Deathwalker online, but about time slips, and what got him doing the time slips that maybe some ghosts that we think are ghosts are just time slips is because he went to a location and he got his own name coming through on an EVP, what sounded like his voice, and he had been there before, but it sounded like him saying his own name, and he's like, maybe my energy is still here, kind of like a residual haunting, and it caught, or maybe a time slip.
I think that's a brilliant point of view. The reason why I say it's brilliant is because I actually mentioned that one time previously as well, too. So I have to take but no, I agree. So many people are out there, and I think, now check this out as well, too. This is another one of my theories. I truly think those people that are so passionate about ghost hunting are, in a way, having a sort of deja vu. I think that they probably all already kind of presupposed to this type of thing because they have already lived it, if that makes any sense. Their future selves have already lived it, right?
Yeah.
And now the idea that our present self has some sort of memory about what our future self is doing, that's really, really cool. And from a research point of view, that sounds like something I want to study more.
Yeah, the time slips fascinate me to no end. And like I said, I when I go into an investigation, I try to go in with not being biased at all or expecting anything. I call myself a skeptical believer because of that. But yeah, a lot of things I've experienced could have been like you're saying, like maybe I'm seeing myself go around the corner and I may do that same motion in 10 minutes.
Exactly. And it could even be like the shadow figures that people talk about as well, too. That could be the residual energies of other people that were ghost hunting there at one time. We really don't know what we're dealing with. But the idea of time slips is making more and more sense to me, especially when we talk about the realm of like ghost haunting.
Yeah. And I love having conversations like this because you bring some of those theories to the forefront and make people think more about them and let people think that, okay, well, maybe it's an amalgamation of all these different things that is occurring. And the more I dive into the paranormal, the more I find that it's all connected anyway. All the phenomena are kind of connected.
Yeah, preach on, brother. You're actually preaching to the choir here. I believe that completely. I don't believe that there's just one thing. I don't believe that you can just be a ghost investigator or a cryptid hunter or a UFO investigator, the MUFON people. I think this paranormal world really is something that is interconnected in ways that we simply cannot understand. And actually, I think if the veil was lifted from us and we kind of could peer in to find out the interconnectivity of all this, it might be more startling than just the idea of a Bigfoot walking around or extraterrestrials visiting Earth. from time to time. I think there's more going on here than meets the eye. I think there is a certain harmony and harmonics to the creation. I think that every now and then we become in tune with this world, almost like a paranormal Wi-Fi hotspot, and things come through to us. But I also think that the observer, the experiencer, has to be open to that as well too. I think there almost has to be kind of a non-spoken agreement between the experiencer and that which is experienced. I really think that is. So a lot of times, whenever people are witnessing these creatures or these phenomenon, it's almost as if they're being gifted this. It's a sort of revelation for whatever reason. Again, ghost hunters will sometimes have that moment where they see the full-bodied apparition or they hear something that really strikes a chord to them. But you would think that's kind of unusual for a paranormal researcher to get that kind of stuff. It's too poetically coincidental that they're getting this kind of stuff. And the reason I say this is because several years ago, there was my kids didn't have school on a snow day. So I try not to smoke, but I was smoking at the time, cigarettes, of course. And my kids were having a day off. And this is not going to be a good day at the Murphy household because I'm a single dad and I had 5 kids to deal with. So I made my way out to the car to get a smoke before I started my day. And I noticed as I went outside that there were footprints in my yard. I thought, this is strange. It looked like child-sized footprints with the toes visible and everything. And I thought, this is too good to be true. And I tried to follow them, and the tracks appeared out of nowhere. And not only did they appear out of nowhere, but it was a right foot, and then a left right foot, as if something slowly materialized or something stepped off of something. I have no other way to describe it. But this trackway went up to my dining room window where it appeared to apparently peer into the window, and then it went down over the hill, and they disappeared just as abruptly as they began. Now, I'm a Bigfoot investigator. How does this happen? It appears as if whatever I'm investigating came to investigate me. Yeah. And unless there's some sort of connection there, it really doesn't make any sense. And I'm sure from your point of view, you have these kind of anecdotal things happening to people too, whether they're ghost hunting or UFO investigators or what have you.
Yeah, I always like to say the more you look into the paranormal, the more it looks into you.
Oh, that's absolutely perfect. Yes, yeah. I think that's a great motto to have. And that there is something to be said about that. And Carl Jung, even if we would deal from a completely practical area, the idea of the psychology, like Carl Jung said that in every person is a shadow, this place where we really don't want to go to. That's where our secrets lie. That's where all the skeletons in the collective human closet reside. This is where we put all of our fears, all of our trepidations. But inside that shadow is a mirror. And whenever we look into that mirror, we see ourselves reflected back. And that is actually what you said in a nutshell. The more we look into the paranormal, the more it's going to look back at us. And not only is it going to look back at us, it's going to evaluate us. And we're kind of fearful of that, right? Because if it evaluates us, then it determines whether we are capable of understanding what is going on. And I think that people really do need to approach this world as an interactive one. That, that if you're going out there, the results of what you might come across may depend upon your consciousness, your outlook on things, especially if this does have to do with some sort of vibrational frequencies and things of that nature. But yeah, I think that what you said there really does kind of encapsulate the entirety of the paranormal world.
Yeah, and I started having experiences when I was 8 years old. I had my first paranormal experience that I can remember. And then I really didn't have anything that I can think of until I was a teenager when I started going out and investigating. And then I started having more happening to me in my own home, not necessarily with things follow me, I don't guess, but even on locations. Like, it seems like the more I do it, the more that happens and the more response I get. And, maybe like you're saying and I believe in the vibration and the frequency thing too. I talk about that a lot, but maybe, because we're looking into the paranormal, and we're opening ourselves up to that, maybe we change our vibration to be on kind of that level a little more, to experience more.
Yeah, let's take it by extension to the next step. Maybe we're not necessarily changing our vibration. Maybe we're simply syncing it up with a vibration that's already there.
Yeah.
And that syncing up vibrations, again, we're not talking about something outside the realm of possibility, because the University in Berkeley actually came up with a study about vibrational frequencies and discovered that if you take two unlike objects that pulsate on different frequencies and you set them side to side, that eventually that vibrational frequency will sync up. And I think that there's a lot to be said about that. I think the idea of putting yourself in a place and allowing yourself to be this conduit. And I'm not talking about opening yourself up as a vessel for possession or anything like that.
Right.
I'm talking about just sitting out there and mindfully understanding that you're in a situation that, that you are really taking part of an experience, that can somehow sync up these frequencies and allow not only for you to see something, but allow for the other, the unexplored, the unknown to come to you as well.
Yeah, and I always explain the frequency thing to people in the fact that, we're full of energy, and every form of energy has its own vibration and frequency. And so even light, everything in our world, light, sound, radio waves. So, science proves that these things exist, even though we can't see them. We're always bombarded with Wi-Fi signals or radio waves or, our cell phone signals, and they're coming in from all around us. And even though we can't see them, we know they exist because we use Wi-Fi, we use our phone, we can see in the dark with the light on, and so it makes a lot of sense to me, especially with the vibration and the frequency stuff.
That's right. Oh yeah. And if people don't believe, there's a lie. I get a lot of naysayers too about, how idiotic the idea of frequency sounds. But one of the things I point out is infrasound. And we know from science that infrasound absolutely exists,
Right.
A lot of cetaceans use them, whales and dolphins. But if you look at things like alligators and crocodiles, they use infrasound. And so do some mammals like giraffes and elephants and lions and tigers all use infrasound as well too. And it has been thought, there's a theory out there in the scientific world that as part of the hunting strategy of tigers, that they're able to put out infrasound to actually stun their prey. And people have encountered Bigfoot as well too, and said that they felt as if somebody punched them in the chest when they experienced this kind of creature, even though the creature was nowhere physically around them. So the idea of this being able to put out in the atmosphere or out in the environment, the idea that sound can impact the way you look at the world or the way you deal with the world is something that is part of the biological record. We know that it exists. Now that we know it exists, let's kind of talk about what can and cannot be done with it. But I think the idea of infrasound, the idea of how it can change frequencies, and even our own thought patterns about what's going on, it might be able to make us believe there's something out there that's actually not there. And at that point, that's a complete game changer in the world of paranormal investigations.
Yeah, and they've even shown that with like electromagnetic fields, high electromagnetic fields can cause you to hallucinate and auditory and visual hallucinations. And they did
absolutely, yep.
Yeah, they did an experiment with this thing they call the God helmet, and where they put this helmet on people and just throw all of this EMF into their brain. And like when I go out to a paranormal investigation, I don't use K2s and millimeters and things like that measure EMF to look for any kind of spirits. I use them. What they were brought into the paranormal for is to look for these EMF fields. And I've been to a private investigation where there was over 1,000 milligauss just coming out of their Wi-Fi router. And in a normal home, it should be 0.1, 0.2.
That's right. That's right. Well, you know what? I utilize it, the EMF detector, whenever I go out on Bigfoot research as well, too. Because if we're out in the middle of nowhere and the things aren't spiking, what's not to say, again, getting back to the idea of these, spots on the Earth, on the planet, is it possible that our planet has, nodes that produce an, energy or whatever to allow you to think differently or to manifest things differently? So I use that whenever I'm on the field. And I've got spikes in very remote, out of the way places that you would not expect anything to happen.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting because, yeah, out in the middle of the forest, there's nothing electrical around and you're not going to be close to any radio signals or anything like that.
No.
Yeah.
Now, we will even take it and sit it down and move away from it so there's not even any camera interference and do that. Now, I will, this was relatively recently. This was about maybe about 3 months ago. I was out on an investigation, and we were getting a lot of spikes on the EMF in the middle of nowhere. And so we decided that we were going to bring out the spirit box and ask what's going on. And, we were talking, and you said, if there's anything out here, let there be a sign, the typical kind of, amateurish things that people do, to see if you can elicit any kind of response. And we asked for some sort of sign that there's something out here with us. And we heard a huge crash. And I asked, is there something out here with us? Oh, no, I'm sorry. What is out here with us? And without missing a beat, almost on cue, you could not have Hollywood write it any better than this. Over the spirit box, immediately it said Bigfoot. Never had anything like that. I've never heard something like that again. And, and I was with adult researchers, and we had no idea what to do with it. So we took off. Look, I'm all about self-preservation as well, too. Right. I had no idea what was going on. But we were so, fear is really not the explanation for it. It was something more. There's something more primal. That flight or fight response kicks in, and it's always the flight response with me, because I think there's something very primal about what happens, along these things. And it was to the point that the guy that was operating the spirit box simply would not turn it back on again because he didn't want to hear anything else that was going to be said. It was that much of an impact.
Yeah. Yeah, I always people ask me if I've ever gone out because, like I said, I'm a ghost guy. I've been a paranormal investigator for many years and researcher, but people always ask me, do I go out, have I ever been to a Bigfoot hunt? And I'm like, no, I prefer to live. Like,
That's exactly right, man. Exactly right. I remember we were investigating this one dog. There's a town very close to where I live that has, reported dogman sightings. And as we went to the town and we started to explore the area, we came across a cave that overlooked the town. I thought, this is like one of those eureka moments. And the investigators that I were with started to go into the cave, and they said, don't you want to come in with us? And I said, for one thing, I'm claustrophobic, and the other thing is I don't want to be torn apart by a dog man. Simple as that. You know what I mean? Look, we found our evidence. Let's get on with the story here. But yeah, there are things like there's a lot of people who take their lives in their hand. I'm not like that whatsoever. I will tell you first, I'm not antagonizing. I'm not confrontational. I go out there, I collect evidence, but in no way do I want to negatively interact with these things. And probably, to be quite honest with you, I don't know if I even want a positive interaction with these things.
Yeah. Yeah, especially when you hear these stories from like hunters who have been out in the woods their entire lives, and they see something like a dogman or a Bigfoot and they have an interaction that might not even be threatening or anything, but they sell all their hunting gear and their dogs and they never go back in the woods hunting again.
Exactly. Well, and I interviewed one guy that saw one just walking. And he said, his bladder and his bowels released. I don't want that to happen to me either.
Right.
Like something happens to these people that is far more than just a sighting. Something biologically happens to them to cause them to completely lose it, And whenever somebody comes up and tells me that, I thought, what could you possibly get out of telling somebody that you crapped your pants because you saw a Bigfoot? There's something so basic about the story that they're telling them and the honesty in which they tell the story that these guys aren't making this stuff up.
Right.
And if this guy's not making it up, then what the hell is out there? There's something going on out there that we really need to investigate strongly. And that's why you and I are on the phone together tonight.
Right. Yeah. Talking about it and educating people on things that we've experienced and theories that we ponder all the time. So you mentioned that you're working on another book. Do you have anything else coming up here soon?
You know what? Yeah, I do have a couple things. In October, it's going to be my busy month, of course, as it happens to be. But on the 17th of September, so this month in a couple weeks, I will be at Hillview Manor giving a talk on witches. And then after the witch talk, I will be leading an investigation of Hillview Manor and the grounds surrounding it. And then in October, I believe it's the 23rd of October, I will be in Gettysburg, and then I will be doing something in my hometown. And I love to do things in my hometown because this is the place that I started to become this kind of a fledgling investigator. You know, the same library where I did my research as a kid, now I'll be doing talks at, which I absolutely love. So if any of your listeners are in the Blairsville, Pennsylvania area, about 35 miles outside of Pittsburgh, I will be there as well, too. And if you go to my social media, Ronald L. Murphy Jr. on Facebook, you can find all the times there as well, too. But, yeah, I'm pretty busy in the month of October. And then hopefully, you know, next year we get together again for another Dogman conference.
Yeah, that would be great. That would be awesome. I would definitely come again and enjoy that. And especially at a different, because they're talking about doing a different location every time. And
they are. I think that would be so great. I would have one suggestion, is that they would open it up to the paranormal. Can you imagine how amazing that would be if you had 8 speakers all talking about a different subject? That'd be mind-blowing.
Yeah. Yeah, and just do a huge paranormal conference around all of it.
Absolutely. Yeah. But Josh Hearn's a good guy, and I will be there if he hopefully asks me, because like I said, I got so much out of that conference.
Yeah, it was a great time, and I got to meet great people like you, and now have you on the show, which is awesome.
Well, again, like I said, I'm very, very flattered that you would want to have me on the program. And I hope your listeners enjoyed it. I hope you enjoyed it as well, too.
Yeah, I've had a blast. Thank you so much for coming on.
Hey, my friend, anytime you want me, I am looking forward to talking to you again, my friend.
Yeah, for sure. I'd love to have you back on in the future. And everybody can find your books on Amazon and Kindle under Ronald L. Murphy Jr.
That's right. And several of my books are even available at Walmart now. So the Walmart doesn't carry, you can order it through Walmart as well, too.
That is awesome. All right. Thank you so much, Ron. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, my friend. I appreciate you having me on.
All right, everybody. Stay safe out there. We'll see you next time. Have a good day. Join us next time for a new episode of The Unseen Paranormal. Until then, head over to the Unseen Paranormal Lounge on Facebook for all the latest updates and discussions about the show. You can also find us on Instagram, Twitter, or at unseenparanormalpodcast.com. And please rate, review, share, and subscribe to help more people discover the show. The Unseen Paranormal Podcast is proud to be the ambassador for paranormal for Verbal.com. A big thank you to my friend Chris Lips for the awesome theme music. You can find more of his music on Apple, Amazon, or Spotify. And as always, thank you for listening.
You have come to the end of the line. Whoa. I can feel you as you pass the other side.